Yes, I was the man who lied to his wife on their anniversary. I told her I was working late, but the truth? I was with another woman, my ex-wife. Not for love, not for lust, but for something worse, cowardice. I let her believe I'd moved on completely while I kept a secret life running in the shadows of our marriage. And the day she walked into my office with that box of pastries in her hands was the day every lie I told finally collapsed. I've done terrible things, but I'm trying to be honest now. If you're watching this, please stay till the end. Maybe my story will stop someone from doing the same. And if you believe that even broken people can change, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments that you still believe in redemption. After that day, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maya standing there, frozen at the doorway, holding that box of pastries like it was her last piece of hope. I can still hear her voice, soft but breaking. "Elias, who is she?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her, the air thick with everything I didn't say. That silence has followed me since. It's strange how guilt has a sound. It's not loud, it's quiet, like a heartbeat you can't turn off. I used to tell myself I was a good man, a husband who worked hard, provided, loved in his own way. But that night, sitting alone in my car outside our house, I realized being good doesn't mean much when you hide the truth. I had reasons, or at least that's what I told myself. I thought I was protecting her. I thought she didn't need to know about Olivia, about Celeste's illness, about the boy who still called me Uncle Eli. I thought honesty would only hurt her. But the real reason? I was afraid. Afraid she'd see me differently. Afraid she'd think I still belonged to my past. Maybe afraid she'd leave. Fear has a way of dressing up like love. You convince yourself you're doing it for someone else when you're really just trying to save yourself. For weeks before everything collapsed, I felt something shifting in our home. Maya laughed less. She'd pause before answering my texts. I'd catch her looking at me across the table like she was searching for a version of me she could still trust. And I couldn't meet her eyes. Every time I did, I felt like I was stealing time I didn't deserve. When you lie to someone kind, it's worse than lying to someone cruel. Because they keep giving you chances. They keep believing. Maya believed in me more than anyone ever did. And that's what made it unbearable. I'd sit in my office pretending to focus on blueprints while my mind replayed our mornings. The way she'd make 2 cups of coffee, one always a little sweeter because she knew I wouldn't say no to sugar if she'd already added it. That small kind of love is what kills you when you break it. Olivia's messages would come in at odd hours. "Elias, can you help me with the client call tomorrow?" "Celeste's fever came back. Can you cover the invoice?" And I'd say yes, not because I wanted her back, God no, but because I couldn't stand the idea of a child suffering while I had the means to fix it. Maya didn't know about that side of me, the part that still felt responsible for everything that went wrong before. I thought hiding it was mercy. Turns out, mercy can look a lot like deceit. The night before the anniversary, I remember staring at the flowers Olivia had sent as a thank you. I should have thrown them away. I almost did. But I was tired, careless, maybe a bit proud, thinking it meant nothing. So I left them there. The next morning, Maya walked in with those pastries. She wasn't supposed to come. She wasn't supposed to see any of it. Life has a cruel sense of timing. After the confrontation, I sat in the empty office, staring at the cold coffee on my desk. My phone kept lighting up, texts from her, then silence. That silence lasted days, then weeks. We still lived under the same roof, but the air between us felt like glass. One wrong move and everything would shatter. Sometimes she'd ask, "How was work?" And I'd say, "Busy, just that." And she'd nod. I could see her trying. But trust doesn't grow back overnight. You can't patch it up with flowers or apologies. It's like a bone that healed wrong. You feel it every time you move. There's a moment every liar faces when you start believing your own story. I'd look in the mirror and think, I'm not a bad man. Maybe I wasn't evil, but I was weak. And weakness can destroy love just as easily as cruelty. At night, I'd hear her in the kitchen, moving quietly. She thought I was asleep, She'd whisper something, maybe praying, maybe cursing my name, I don't know. I never had the courage to ask. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering when I became the kind of man who needed forgiveness from the person who once called me her peace. I wish I could tell you guilt fades. It doesn't. It just changes shape. Sometimes it's regret, sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's the look in her eyes when she tries to smile and can't. I broke something that day, not just between us, but inside me. Before everything fell apart, before the lies and the silence, there was a time I believed I had my life together. Maya and I had been married for 3 years, and for the first time, I thought peace was possible. She brought calm into my chaos. Her laughter filled the house. Her faith in me steadied everything I touched. I'd come home late from the firm, exhausted, covered in dust from the sights, and she'd still greet me like I was the best part of her day. Maybe that's why it hurt so much later, because I knew exactly what I was destroying. It all started with a phone call from an old number I should have deleted long ago. Olivia, my ex-wife. I remember staring at the name glowing on my screen like a ghost from another life. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. Elias, it's Celeste, she said. She's sick again. The treatments, they're expensive. I'm not asking for anything personal, but I thought maybe you could. I should have said no, or at least, let me talk to Maya first. But I didn't. I just said, I'll see what I can do. That was the moment it began. Not the cheating kind of betrayal, but the quiet one. The kind that starts with good intentions and ends in ruin. Celeste had been my stepdaughter for 5 years. I raised her when Olivia's first husband walked out. I taught her how to ride a bike, helped her with school projects, sat in hospital waiting rooms when she was 8 and struggling with asthma. When Olivia and I divorced, I promised myself I'd step back. She wasn't my child by blood, and Maya deserved a clean start. But when I heard Celeste's name, all that resolve vanished. Some bonds don't care about titles. So I sent money, small at first, enough for medication, for food. Then Olivia asked if she could meet me to discuss something bigger, a contractor's project she was consulting on. She said she needed help, that my experience at Apex could make the difference. Again, I told myself it was business, strictly professional. I didn't tell Maya. That's where the first real crack appeared. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't trust myself. I knew how it would sound. Your husband is meeting his ex-wife for work. Even if it was true, it wouldn't sound right, and I didn't want to see that flicker of doubt in her eyes. So I convinced myself that keeping it quiet was kindness. 1 meeting became 2, then 5. Soon Olivia and I were exchanging late-night texts about blueprints, budgets, timelines. Every ping on my phone made me flinch. Maya noticed. Of course she did. "Who's texting this late?" she asked once, half joking. "Just work," I said. And it was work, mostly. That's how lies breathe, in the space between mostly and completely. The project was a big one, a redevelopment deal for an old coastal property, the same one that once belonged to Olivia's family. She wanted to turn it into something new, something that could pay for Celeste's medical bills. I told myself I was helping a child, not an ex-wife. But deep down, I knew I was also helping myself feel like the man I used to be, capable, needed, still useful in someone's story. The truth is, I missed that version of me. With Maya, life was peaceful, maybe too peaceful sometimes. She didn't know the part of me that thrived in chaos, that needed to fix broken things, even people. Olivia was still a storm. She always had been. And storms attract men like me because we think surviving them means we're strong. But it wasn't about love. I never loved Olivia like I loved Maya. With Maya, it was warmth. With Olivia, it was gravity. Dangerous, unrelenting, but familiar. That's what made it dangerous. Familiarity. You don't see the danger in something you've already survived once. The more I tried to balance both worlds, the heavier it got. I'd leave home early, pretending to beat traffic when really I was meeting Olivia to go over site plans. Sometimes I'd look at her and see traces of the life we almost built. The laughter, the fights, the wreckage. And I'd feel this strange mix of guilt and nostalgia. I wasn't cheating, but I wasn't innocent either. Each time I came home, Maya's voice would pull me back. "Dinner's getting cold," she'd say, smiling, not knowing how much I didn't deserve that smile. I'd kiss her forehead and tell myself, "Tomorrow, I'll tell her everything." But tomorrow never came. It never does for men like me, men who keep choosing peace over truth until peace turns into silence. It didn't take long before the web started to spin around me. I thought I could control it, manage every lie like another project at work, neat, compartmentalized, efficient. But emotions aren't blueprints. They bleed into everything. I started double-checking my phone before going home, deleting messages, rehearsing answers in my head. I told myself it was temporary, just until Celeste's treatment was done, just until the project wrapped up. But just until has no end date when guilt is your clock. At the office, people started noticing. My assistant once joked, "Boss, your ex has better timing than your wife." I laughed it off, but inside I froze. I realized people saw things I pretended weren't visible. Even the security guard at the entrance, the one who later called Olivia my wife, must have picked up on something in how we spoke, how we walked together. That was my fault. I blurred the lines until they didn't exist. There was one afternoon I remember too clearly. Maya had texted me, "Dinner at 7, I made your favorite." I looked at the message, smiled, and then Olivia called. "Elias, can you drop by? Max's science project fell apart and I don't know how to fix it." Max, Celeste's little brother. I told myself it'd only take 30 minutes. It took 3 hours. I missed dinner. When I walked in, Maya was sitting by the window, plate untouched, candles burnt out. She didn't yell. She just looked up and said, "You okay?" That kindness felt like a knife. She had no idea where I'd been, and I used that ignorance as a shield. I kissed her forehead, said, "Work emergency." She nodded, believing me, and I went to the shower so she wouldn't see me shaking. That night, I stared at my reflection and thought, if I tell her now, she'll forgive me. But I didn't. Because forgiveness means exposure, and I was still too proud to bleed. There's this strange thing about secrets. They make you feel both powerful and pathetic. You think you're protecting people, but what you're really doing is feeding your own ego. I liked being the savior again. The man who could fix a child's project, who could handle crises, who could still matter. I told myself I was being selfless, but every act of helping Olivia was a thread in the web I was weaving, and eventually I couldn't tell which part of me was genuine and which was guilt. Maya started asking more questions. "You've been distracted lately. You smell like paint. You're working weekends now?" I had answers for everything. Too quick, too neat. That's how she knew something was off. Love makes people observant. I think she wanted to believe me, but she also wanted to believe her intuition. Both couldn't be true. Then came the flowers. Olivia had them sent as a thank you, a bright mix of lilies and daisies, her usual choice. They arrived at my office on a Friday morning. I meant to throw them away, but one of the clients saw them and said, "Nice touch. Your wife must really love you." I smiled, corrected nothing. I don't even know why. Maybe because for a second it felt good to still be seen as loved by someone. Anyone. That's how pathetic I had become. That single moment, that lazy decision not to clarify, set everything else in motion. When the guard later called Olivia Mrs. Hayes, I didn't correct him either. I laughed it off. That laughter would cost me my marriage. The worst part, I still thought I was doing the right thing. I told myself I'd tell Maya after the project was over, after Celeste was stable. I even planned it out in my head. We'd go on a weekend trip. I'd confess everything, she'd cry. I'd promise to never hide anything again. A clean ending to a dirty story. But life doesn't wait for your perfect timing. It rips the curtain down when you least expect it. Sometimes at night, when Maya fell asleep beside me, I'd whisper apologies she couldn't hear. "I'm sorry, just a little longer." As if saying it softly could erase the noise of what I was doing. I started sleeping less, eating less. My body was still in our marriage, but my mind was scattered across every lie I told to hold it together. People think betrayal happens in a single act, one decision, one kiss, one secret. But the truth is, it's a slow build, brick by brick, excuse by excuse. By the time you realize you've built a wall, the person you love is already on the other side. The week before everything fell apart, I could feel the storm coming. Not in any dramatic way, no shouting, no slammed doors, just a silence that hummed through the house like a warning. Maya had stopped asking where I was. That's when I knew she didn't believe me anymore. When someone stops asking questions, it's because the answers have already broken them. I'd come home and find her sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone, pretending to read. I'd ask, "Long day?" and she'd nod, not looking up. The air between us was polite, careful, rehearsed. Two actors reading lines from a script we didn't believe in anymore. One night, she left a plate on the table, pasta, her usual comfort food. I came home late, as always, and she said, "You work too much, Eli." Just that, quiet, almost kind. I wanted to tell her everything right then. The words even made it to my throat. But then she smiled, soft and tired, and said, "You're trying your best, I know." That broke me more than anger ever could. How do you confess to someone who still sees the best in you when you know you've buried it? That same week, Olivia called again. "Elias, the contractor's threatening to pull out unless we confirm by tomorrow." Her voice was shaking. "If we lose this deal, I'll lose everything." I didn't even hesitate. "I'll handle it." That's what I always said. I'll handle it. Like some hero cleaning up a mess no one asked me to fix. I told myself I was doing it for the child, for closure, for redemption, anything but what it really was, ego wrapped in guilt. The next morning, Maya noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "You're burning yourself out," she said, pouring me coffee. "Maybe you should take a day off." I smiled, pretending to agree. "Soon," I said. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "Don't disappear on me." I still remember that line, "Don't disappear on me." It wasn't a request. It was a warning disguised as love. And I ignored it. At work, everything blurred together. Meetings, deadlines, late-night calls. Olivia and I were constantly in touch, trying to save that project. Somewhere along the way, she started thanking me too often, using words that carried history. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I'd nod, change the subject, pretend it meant nothing. But it did. Not because I wanted her back, but because it fed something I didn't want to admit still lived inside me, the need to feel irreplaceable. Guilt became my shadow. I carried it everywhere, pretending it wasn't there. I told myself, once the project is done, I'll tell Maya everything. But I was already too deep. Every good intention had turned into another secret, every act of kindness, another sin. The night before our anniversary, I sat at my desk at home, finishing reports. Maya came over, leaned on my shoulder and said, "You know what tomorrow is?" I smiled, trying to sound casual. "Of course I do." She grinned, kissed my temple and said, "Don't forget to eat breakfast. You've been skipping meals lately." She walked away humming a song I didn't recognize. I should have stopped her. I should have told her everything right there. But I didn't. I just sat there, pretending work was more urgent than the truth. Later that night, Olivia texted, "Thank you again for everything, Elias. I left something for you at the office. Just a small thank you." I didn't reply. I thought it was probably paperwork or a card. The next morning, those flowers were sitting on my desk, lilies and daisies, bright as guilt. I remember staring at them, thinking I'd throw them away before Maya ever saw them. But the day got busy, meetings piled up, and I forgot. That's how simple it was, how stupid, how human. Not a grand betrayal, just negligence, just cowardice. If I could go back, I wouldn't erase what I did. I'd erase every thought that told me silence was mercy. I'd rather have hurt her with the truth than kill her with uncertainty. But that's the thing about lies. You always think you have time to explain them later. Then one day, later becomes the moment she walks into your office with pastries and hope in her hands and sees the flowers you never threw away. That was the moment the storm finally arrived. The morning after our anniversary was the moment I knew for sure I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Maya didn't say much that day. She moved around the kitchen in silence, making coffee, her movements calm but too controlled, the way someone acts when they're holding back everything they want to scream. I tried to speak, to say something ordinary like good morning, but the words stuck. She looked at me once, just once, and that look said it all. She knew something was wrong. I could have told her then. I could have said, "It's not what you think," or "Let me explain," or just, "I'm sorry." But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my briefcase and left for work early. Another coward's retreat disguised as responsibility. On the drive there, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. My mind kept looping the same image. Maya standing in the doorway, the box of pastries in her hands, her eyes wide with disbelief. The image burned into me like a scar. Still, I convinced myself there was time to fix it, to clean up the mess before she pieced it all together. That's how denial works. It turns guilt into strategy. When I got to the office, the flowers were still there. Their scent made me sick. I wanted to throw them out, but part of me couldn't. Maybe I wanted to suffer. Maybe I thought keeping them there was some form of self-punishment, a reminder of how small the lie had started. I stared at them for a long time before moving them into the trash, pressing the petals down like I was burying something alive. Then Olivia called. Her timing was always perfect in the worst way. "Elias, are you okay?" she asked. "You sound off." "I'm fine," I lied. "You sure? You don't sound fine." "I said I'm fine, Olivia." I could hear the defensiveness in my own voice. She went quiet for a moment. Then softly she said, "I didn't mean to make things worse for you." That line hit me harder than I expected, because she had, and it wasn't her fault. It was mine. She didn't ask me to hide things. She didn't tell the guard to call her Mrs. Hayes. I let those moments happen. I chose to protect the illusion because it was easier than facing the truth. That afternoon, I sat through meetings like a ghost. People talked, plans were made, and I nodded at all the right times. But my head was somewhere else, home. Maya hadn't texted once. Normally she'd send something, a meme, a reminder, a heart, nothing. That silence felt heavier than any argument. By lunchtime, I told myself I'd fix it that evening. I'd go home early, bring dinner, explain everything from the start, Celeste's illness, the money, the project. I even rehearsed how I'd say it. Calm, measured, remorseful. I thought maybe, just maybe, honesty could still salvage something. But when evening came, I didn't go home early. I stayed. Olivia had asked for one last review before submitting the proposal, and I said yes, again. Because part of me still believed I could multitask morality. I could save my marriage and my conscience. I could be the good husband and the responsible man from his past. It's absurd, but that's what guilt does. It convinces you that you can manage damage like a spreadsheet. We worked late. She brought coffee. We barely spoke outside of work details. Yet, the silence between us was heavy with memory. I caught her looking at me once, eyes softer than they should have been. I looked away. That's when I realized, even if nothing physical ever happened, I was still betraying Maya. Betrayal isn't just about touch. It's about attention, energy, care, all the invisible things that belong to the person you promised to protect. When I finally left, the city was asleep. I drove home on autopilot, every red light feeling like judgment. I parked outside our house and sat there for 15 minutes, engine running, watching the lights in the windows flicker off one by one. I thought maybe she's asleep. Maybe tomorrow I'll tell her. Always tomorrow. I turned off the car, walked inside, and found her sitting at the dining table, awake, waiting. The untouched dinner was cold, candles burned down to stubs. She didn't say a word. She just looked at me and whispered, "You're late again." I wanted to say, "I know." I wanted to tell her everything. Instead, I said, "It's work." 2 words that would become the final excuse in a long line of small betrayals. That was the night I knew I'd lost her trust. Not because she accused me, but because she stopped believing the difference between truth and lie even mattered anymore. That night, after Maya whispered those 2 words, "You're late again," the house felt colder than usual. She stood up, cleared the plates without looking at me, and I just watched her in silence. The sound of metal against porcelain was sharper than shouting. It was the sound of disappointment. She didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer answers. We both knew the silence between us had more truth than anything I could have said. When she went upstairs, I stayed behind. The clock ticked too loudly. I sat there, staring at the faint candle wax stuck to the tablecloth, thinking about how something small and beautiful can burn itself out, trying to give light. That was us. That was me. I thought about going after her, telling her everything right there, about Olivia, about Celeste, about every lie I'd told, thinking it was protection. But I didn't. Because the truth at that point wasn't going to sound noble. It was going to sound exactly like what it was: selfishness. I wasn't afraid of her anger. I was afraid of her clarity. Maya's strength was never in shouting. It was in the way she could see through people without saying a word. I cleaned up the table just to have something to do. When I finally went upstairs, she was pretending to sleep. I lay beside her, close enough to feel her breathing, but far enough to know the space between us was growing wider by the second. I whispered, "Good night." She didn't answer. The next morning, she made breakfast. Quiet, simple, polite. She asked, "What time will you be home?" I said, "The usual." She nodded, didn't press. That was worse than suspicion. That was surrender. When love gives up questioning, it's already halfway out the door. At work, I couldn't focus. Every call sounded distant, every email pointless. I told Olivia we needed to finish the project sooner. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You've been distracted." "I'm fine," I said automatically. She sighed. "Elias, if you need to step back, I can handle things." "No," I interrupted, sharper than I meant to. "I'll finish what I started." And I meant it, not just about the project, but about the mess I'd made. I wanted to end it properly, to tie up every loose end so I could finally face Maya with a clean slate. But that's not how life works. You can't clean a wound while it's still bleeding. That afternoon, I saw a message pop up on my phone from Maya. Just 5 words: "We need to talk tonight." My heart dropped. I knew what that meant. She knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, waiting for the clock to move faster, dreading the moment it did. When I drove home, the sky was turning dark, the kind of heavy blue that comes before rain. Every stoplight felt like judgment. I rehearsed my confession over and over, how I'd start, where I'd pause, what I'd admit, what I'd hold back. I thought maybe if I said it right, she'd understand. But there's no version of the truth that doesn't hurt. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw her car. The lights inside were still on. My throat went dry. I sat there for a few seconds, engine running, staring at the door. The truth was right there, waiting for me on the other side, and I couldn't move. Then my phone buzzed. It was Olivia again, a single message. "Thank you, Elias. I couldn't have done this without you." The worst possible timing. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen until the text faded. When I finally walked into the house, Maya was at the dining table again, her laptop open, papers scattered. She looked up, calm but unreadable. "We need to talk," she said softly. I nodded. "I know." "Then talk," she said. I opened my mouth, but the words tangled in my throat. I wanted to tell her everything, but all that came out was, "I'm sorry." "For what?" she asked, voice steady. "For not being honest," I said. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "Not being honest about what, Elias?" I froze. That was the moment, the last exit before the crash. And I missed it. I told her another half-truth, one last attempt to buy time I didn't deserve. About work, about being too busy. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. "I hope one day, when you finally tell the truth, It won't be too late. She walked upstairs, leaving me alone with the echo of her footsteps, and every lie I'd ever told ringing in my ears. That was the night the truth waited outside our marriage, and I was too afraid to open the door. After that night, everything between Maya and me became quiet. Not peaceful, just silent in the way broken glass lies still before someone steps on it. We spoke less, and when we did, it was about things that didn't matter. Bills, groceries, errands. Our sentences got shorter, our laughter rarer. It's strange how a marriage doesn't end with a fight. It ends with an echo. I tried to carry on like nothing had changed. I went to work, I smiled in meetings, I even started coming home earlier. But the house felt different, colder, emptier, like the walls had learned our secrets. Maya didn't wait up for me anymore. She'd be in the bedroom, lights off, pretending to sleep. I'd sit at the edge of the bed, staring at her silhouette, wondering if she could hear my heart pounding. I wanted to reach out, to touch her shoulder, to say something simple like, "I'm sorry," but guilt makes you clumsy. Every time I tried, I ended up saying nothing. One evening, I came home to find a small box on the kitchen counter. Inside were the receipts I'd thought I'd hidden, transfers, invoices, payments to Olivia's firm. Maya was sitting at the table, her hands folded, eyes calm but sharp. "You forgot to delete your emails," she said quietly. I froze. My mouth went dry. "Maya, I can explain." "I don't want an explanation," she interrupted, voice steady. "I just want the truth." And there it was, the moment I'd been avoiding since the first lie. I could have told her everything. I could have said, "Yes, I helped Olivia because her daughter is sick," or "I was scared you'd misunderstand." But the truth wasn't about money or projects. It was about the 1,000 little choices that brought us there. And saying that out loud would have destroyed me. So instead, I chose the coward's version of honesty, the half-truth. "It's just work, Maya. I didn't want to worry you." She stared at me for a long time, her eyes full of exhaustion rather than anger. "You really think I'm that fragile?" she asked. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm the fragile one." That was the closest I came to telling her the truth that night. She stood up, walked past me, and whispered, "You don't have to protect me, Elias. You just have to respect me." The next morning, she didn't make coffee. The mug that used to sit beside mine was gone. That small emptiness hit harder than any confrontation. At work, I couldn't concentrate. Olivia noticed. "Elias, you look like you haven't slept in days," she said. "I'm fine," I muttered. She sighed. "You've done enough. Let me handle things for a while." But I couldn't stop. Work became the only place I still felt like I had control. At home, I was the villain. At the office, I could still pretend to be the man who solved problems. One day, I found myself staring out of my office window, wondering how I'd become this, a man split between guilt and habit. I realized that my silence had turned into its own language. Maya didn't ask questions anymore, and I didn't offer answers. We existed like co-workers sharing a house built on old promises. The real punishment wasn't her distance, it was her kindness. She didn't yell, didn't throw accusations. She still left food for me in the fridge, still washed my clothes, still said goodnight before turning off the light. But every act of care felt like a mirror reflecting how unworthy I'd become. One night I came home later than usual, and she was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. "I waited for you," she said softly. "I got caught up at work," I lied again. She nodded. "Of course." Then she looked at me and asked, "Do you still love me, Elias?" The question broke something inside me. Because I did. I loved her deeply. But love doesn't excuse what I'd done. It doesn't erase lies. It doesn't make silence noble. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say it 1,000 times. But all that came out was, "I don't know how to prove it anymore." She smiled sadly. "Maybe you can't." She stood up, kissed my cheek, and went inside. That kiss felt final, like a full stop at the end of a long, unfinished sentence. That night, I sat on the porch until dawn, watching the sky change color. I thought about how many chances I'd had to be honest, how many times she'd left the door open for the truth, and I'd chosen to close it myself. I realized something cruel about lies. They don't just protect you from others, they protect you from seeing who you've become. The next morning, she left early for work without saying goodbye. I watched her car disappear down the street and knew that whatever we were, whatever we'd built, was slowly falling apart. Not with thunder or rage, but with quiet resignation. That's when it hit me. The collapse I feared had already happened. I was just the last one to admit it. After Maya stopped asking where I'd been, I started asking myself the same question. Where had I been? Not physically, but in spirit. Somewhere between who I was and who I became, I'd lost the version of me she married. Days turned into routines we both performed out of muscle memory. We still shared the same bed, the same meals, but not the same life. We moved like ghosts around each other, polite, functional, invisible. Every good morning sounded like a favor. Every good night felt like a ritual for the dead. I tried to fix things the only way I knew how, by working harder. I started bringing home gifts, small ones at first, flowers, her favorite tea, a book she mentioned once. She'd smile, thank me, then set them aside untouched. The more I tried to buy normalcy, the more obvious it became that I was paying for silence. One evening, I cooked dinner, something I hadn't done in months. When she walked in, I said, "I thought I'd surprise you." She stared at the table for a long moment before answering, "You already did, Elias. Once was enough." Her words were calm, but they hit like a confession. There's a kind of honesty that doesn't need to shout. It just stands there, unshakable. After that, I stopped trying to impress her and started trying to understand her distance. I noticed the way she avoided sitting too close, the way her eyes lingered on her phone during our dinners. Once, she laughed at a message and quickly locked her screen. I didn't ask who it was, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't think I had the right to anymore. Every night, I'd lie awake and listen to her breathing, wondering if she was asleep or pretending like I used to. The irony wasn't lost on me. I used to keep secrets to protect her from pain, and now I was the one being protected from a truth I wasn't ready to face. She was slipping away. At work, even the air felt heavier. People whispered when I passed. I didn't care about gossip before, but now every whisper sounded like judgment. I caught myself staring out of my office window again, thinking about how many things I'd built only to watch them crumble. A company, a marriage, a reputation. You can rebuild structures, but not trust. Olivia noticed the change. One afternoon, she came by my office. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Is everything all right at home?" I hesitated. "It's complicated." She nodded slowly. "Because of all this?" She gestured to the project files on my desk. "No," I said. "Because of me." That was the first honest thing I'd said in months. She looked at me with something like pity. "Elias, maybe it's time to let go. You can't keep fixing everyone else's world if yours is falling apart." "I know," I said, though I didn't. Letting go sounded easy when you weren't the one who broke something irreplaceable. That night, I came home to an empty house. The lights were off, the rooms too quiet. On the table was a note, not a letter, just a note. "Went to visit Mum. Be back Sunday. No heart, no nickname, just words." It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did, but it felt like a preview of absence. I sat there reading that note over and over and realised I didn't even know which hurt more, her leaving for a weekend or the possibility that she might not come back at all. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. I left a voicemail. "Maya, I know I've failed you. I know I've been selfish, but please just come home. We can talk. I'll tell you everything." When she didn't answer, I went outside and stood in the cold, staring at the road she'd taken. That's when I finally understood what loneliness really is. Not the absence of someone's body, but the absence of their trust. The next morning, I went through our home like a stranger. I found traces of her everywhere. her perfume on the pillow, a hair tie on the nightstand, her handwriting on sticky notes. Buy milk, call mum, don't forget dinner Friday. Ordinary words that suddenly felt like relics from another lifetime. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered to the empty room, "You're right, Maya. You didn't need me to protect you. You needed me to be honest." That weekend, I didn't sleep. I kept rehearsing what I'd say when she came back. Every sentence started with, "I should have told you," and ended with, "I'm sorry." But deep down, I knew apologies wouldn't fix this. You can't rebuild something that never stopped breaking. By Sunday night, she still hadn't come home. I checked my phone again. No calls, no messages, just silence. I sat by the window, watching the headlights pass, each one a hope that wasn't hers. That's when I realized I wasn't waiting for her forgiveness anymore. I was waiting for my punishment. Maya didn't come home that Sunday. Or Monday. By Tuesday, the house no longer smelled like her perfume. The bed felt bigger, colder. I kept turning toward her side every morning, half expecting her to be there, pretending to sleep like before. But the pillow stayed untouched. I'd lost count of how many times I picked up my phone just to stare at her name on the screen without the courage to call again. At first, I told myself she just needed space, a few days to clear her head, but deep down, I knew she wasn't clearing anything. She was deciding if I was worth forgiving, deciding if love was enough to survive deceit. The longer she stayed away, the louder the house became. Every creak, every hum of the refrigerator sounded like an accusation. I started sleeping in the living room, the couch becoming my punishment. I stopped turning on the lights at night because the shadows felt more honest than the man I saw in the mirror. At work, I went through the motions. I showed up, answered questions, signed contracts, all while pretending my world wasn't falling apart. But people could tell. One afternoon, my colleague Marcus stopped by and said, "Man, you look like you haven't seen the sun in days." I forced a laugh. "Just busy." He hesitated before saying quietly, "Don't let work make you forget your life." I wanted to tell him it wasn't work doing the forgetting, it was me. Even Olivia noticed the emptiness. When she came to drop off some documents, she looked at me and said, "Elias, you should go home early." I almost laughed at the irony. "There's not much to go home to," I said. She went silent, then placed a hand on my desk. "You did what you thought was right," she offered. But that was the problem. I'd convinced myself of that lie for too long. That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone had left. I walked past the conference room, past the glass walls that reflected me like a ghost. I saw the man I'd become, tired, hollow, half of what Maya once loved. I sat at my desk, staring at a photo of us from our second anniversary. She was smiling. I was looking at her, both of us unaware of how fragile that happiness was. I whispered to the photo, "I ruined this, didn't I?" My phone buzzed. For a second, my heart jumped. Her name. But it wasn't a call. It was a message. "I need more time." Just 4 words. No greeting. No promise. I read it over and over until the words blurred. More time. I'd spent months begging for that without realizing that time was never the problem. Truth was, the days after that blurred together. I stopped hearing music in the car. Food lost its taste. Even the air felt heavier. I tried writing her letters I never sent, pages filled with apologies that couldn't change anything. I wrote things like, "I didn't cheat on you, but I betrayed you anyway. I lied to protect myself, not you. I thought silence was mercy, but it was just cowardice. I tore most of them up." Words felt too small for the damage I'd done. One night, I drove by her mother's house. The lights were on. I sat across the street in my car, engine off, watching the faint shadow of Maya move past the curtains. I could have gone to the door, knocked, begged. But what would I say? I'm still the man you loved, just not the man you can trust? No. She deserved peace, not another storm. So I stayed there, in the dark, whispering the apology she'd never hear. "You were right. You didn't need saving. I did." When I got home, the house felt smaller. I opened the fridge and saw the container of soup she'd made the week before she left. Untouched, molded, forgotten. I threw it away, and it felt like throwing away the last piece of our life together. That night, I found myself praying, something I hadn't done in years. I didn't ask for her to come back. I asked for the strength to face her if she didn't. I asked for the courage to stop hiding behind good intentions. It's strange. Losing someone you love doesn't happen all at once. It happens in stages, the silence, the absence, the acceptance. You start by missing their voice, then their smell, then the way they used to say your name. And finally, you miss the person you used to be when they still believed in you. By the end of that week, I stopped expecting her return. Instead, I started learning how to sit with my guilt. I cleaned the house, did the laundry, kept things the way she liked them, as if maintaining the order she created would somehow keep her spirit close. Every night before bed, I whispered, "Good night, Maya," to an empty room. It wasn't hope, it was habit. And habits are what remain when love leaves but guilt stays. I used to think the worst thing that could happen to me was losing her. I was wrong. The worst thing was realizing that she lost me long before she walked out the door. It happened on a Wednesday. Ordinary days are dangerous like that. They don't warn you when they're about to change everything. I was at the office halfway through a meeting when my assistant said, "Your wife's here to see you." My heart stopped. Maya hadn't been there in weeks. I stood up too fast, knocking over my pen. "Send her in," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to sound calm. When she walked in, she looked different. Not angry, not broken, just calm. The kind of calm that comes after you've decided something final. She was holding a folder in one hand, her wedding ring in the other. "Elias," she said softly, "we need to talk." The room went silent. I could feel every pair of eyes turn toward us. "Can we?" I started, motioning toward my office. She nodded and followed. The door clicked shut behind us. She placed the folder on my desk. Inside were copies of the bank transfers, project invoices, screenshots of messages between me and Olivia, everything I thought I'd hidden or deleted. She had it all. "How long?" she asked quietly. I opened my mouth, but the words refused to come. She looked straight at me. "How long have you been lying to me?" "Maya," I said, my throat dry. "Please, let me explain." "Explain what? That you were helping your ex-wife behind my back? That you sent her money? That you let people think she was still your wife?" Her voice didn't rise. It stayed calm, which made every word cut deeper. "It wasn't like that," I said. "It was about her daughter, Celeste. She's sick. I was trying to help." "And you couldn't tell me that?" "I didn't want to hurt you," I said. And the moment the words left my mouth, I heard how pathetic they sounded. She shook her head slowly. "You didn't want to hurt me, so you lied to me." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "That's not protection, Elias. That's control." I didn't know what to say, because she was right. I hadn't been protecting her. I'd been protecting myself from her disappointment, from the risk of being seen as weak or foolish. She leaned against the desk, staring at the photo of us that still sat in its frame. "You know what's funny? I used to brag about you," she said. "To my friends, my family. I'd tell them how lucky I was to have a man who never lied. I built my life around that belief." "Maya, I don't hate you," she said suddenly. "I just don't know who you are anymore." I stepped closer. "I'm still the man who loves you." She looked up, her eyes tired. "No, you're the man who's sorry he got caught." Those words broke me more than shouting ever could, because there was truth in them, and truth has a weight that lies never prepare you for. I tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "You think you're the only one who suffered?" she asked quietly. I stayed awake every night wondering what I did wrong. I thought maybe I wasn't enough, that maybe you were bored. But it turns out the only thing I did wrong was trust you too much. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I felt something inside me collapse. I wanted to kneel, to beg, to promise, but I knew promises meant nothing now. She turned toward the door. "I'm filing for separation," she said. "I don't know if it's forever, but I can't breathe here anymore." I took a step forward. "Please, don't make a decision you can't take back." She looked over her shoulder. "I already did, Elias. You made yours first." And then she walked out, past my assistant, past the reception, through the same door she once used to surprise me on our anniversary. Only this time, she wasn't holding pastries. She was holding the truth. I stood there staring at the empty doorway, hearing the faint echo of her footsteps fade down the hall. My chest felt hollow. For a long time, I couldn't move. The office around me buzzed with life, people going on with their day as if my world hadn't just ended. That night, when I got home, the house felt like a museum, filled with relics of a life that no longer belonged to me. Her clothes were gone, her mug missing from the kitchen shelf, but the framed wedding photo still hung in the hallway, tilted slightly to one side. I reached out to straighten it, but my hand shook too much to touch it. That was the night I realized losing her wasn't punishment, it was justice. After Maya left, time stopped making sense. Days melted into nights, nights into something darker. The house became a monument to everything I'd broken. Every room echoed her absence. I couldn't even bring myself to turn on the lights. It felt disrespectful to illuminate what I'd already ruined. The first few days, I waited for her to come back. I told myself she just needed to cool off, that she'd return once she saw I wasn't the monster she thought I was. I left my phone on the table, always charged, always silent. Each buzz that wasn't her felt like another nail sealing the coffin of what we once had. I went to work pretending I was fine. Everyone could see I wasn't. Marcus stopped by my office once and said, "Man, take some time off." I nodded, but I didn't. Work was the only place where my guilt could hide behind spreadsheets and phone calls. But even there, ghosts found me. I'd look up from my desk and for a second see Maya standing in the doorway again. Same dress, same box of pastries, same heartbreak. Then she'd disappear, and I'd remember that ghosts don't visit people who tell the truth, only liars. One evening, Olivia came to return some signed documents. She looked at me for a long moment before saying, "You look like hell." I laughed bitterly. "That's generous." She placed the papers on my desk. "Does she know everything now?" "She does." "And?" "She's gone." Olivia sighed, her face softening with regret. "I'm sorry, Elias. I never wanted this." "I know," I said, "but I let it happen anyway." She hesitated before saying, "You were trying to do something good. Maybe it just got complicated." I shook my head. Good men don't hide behind good intentions. They tell the truth, even when it burns. That silence between us was thick. She finally said, "You should tell her that, not me." "I would," I said quietly, "if she'd still pick up." After she left, I sat there for hours, staring at the city lights through the glass. Each flicker looked like a window into a life I'd never get back. Around midnight, I opened my laptop and started writing. Not an email, not a letter, just words. Pages and pages of confessions I'd never said out loud. How I'd lied because I was afraid of being seen as less. How I'd mistaken control for love. How I'd turned silence into a weapon. And how it backfired until there was nothing left to protect. By the time I stopped typing, the sun was rising. The city was waking up. I wasn't. I felt like a man who died quietly while everyone else went on living. That weekend, I drove out to the old coastal property, the one Olivia and I had been working on. It was empty now, half finished. The wind whistling through metal frames and open windows. The ocean roared nearby, relentless and uncaring. I walked along the dirt path, boots sinking into the sand, and thought about how every foundation, no matter how strong, can crumble when it's built on half-truths. I stood there, staring at the waves crashing against the rocks, and whispered, "This is what I did to her." I don't know how long I stood there. The wind carried the salt into my throat until I could barely breathe. And for the first time in months, I cried. Not quiet tears, the kind that shake your chest and leave you empty. I cried for her, for myself, for every lie that started with, "I didn't want to hurt you." When I finally calmed down, I noticed something small, a single wildflower growing between two cracks in the concrete foundation. I crouched down, staring at it. Somehow, it had found a way to grow in the ruin. That tiny, stubborn bloom hit me harder than anything else. Maybe because it looked like her, fragile but unbreakable. That night, I went home and did something I should have done long ago. I told the truth, even if it was only to myself. I stood in the middle of the empty living room and said out loud, "I was wrong." Then louder, "I lied because I was weak." And then finally, "She deserved better." The words echoed off the walls. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a grave. It felt like a courtroom, and I was finally on the stand, guilty but honest. I didn't know what came next. Maybe she'd never come back. Maybe I didn't deserve her forgiveness, but I knew one thing: if she ever walked through that door again, I wouldn't hide, I wouldn't defend myself. I'd just tell her the truth, the whole of it, no matter how much it hurt. Because that's the one thing lies never teach you, that the truth doesn't destroy love. It only reveals what was already broken. And as the night settled around me, I whispered her name one last time, not as a plea, but as a prayer. Wherever you are, I hope you're free of the man I used to be. After the night I finally spoke the truth, even if no one else heard it, something inside me shifted. It wasn't relief. Relief comes when you fix something. This was different. It was the quiet weight of acceptance, the kind that settles into your bones when you stop running from who you are. For the first time in months, I started living instead of waiting. I didn't wait for her call, her message, or her forgiveness. I woke up, made my own coffee, opened the windows. The house still echoed, but the air felt cleaner, lighter. Maybe because lies have a smell, stale, suffocating, and I'd finally let the truth breathe. I started going for walks in the evenings, no phone, no excuses, just me and the sound of my own footsteps. The city looked different when I wasn't hiding from it. The coffee shop where we used to go, the park bench where she'd read, the bakery where she bought those cream puffs, they all hurt to look at, but I forced myself to see them anyway. Pain, I learned, doesn't go away when you avoid it. It softens when you stop pretending it's not there. One Sunday morning, I ran into Maya's friend Claire at the farmer's market. She looked surprised to see me. "Elias," she said cautiously, "how are you?" "I'm learning," I answered, and it was the truest thing I could have said. She studied me for a moment before nodding. "She's doing okay," she said gently. "Staying with her mom for now, working again, taking things slow." I smiled, not out of joy, but out of gratitude. "That's good," I said. "She deserves peace." Claire hesitated. "She said you never meant to hurt her, just that you didn't know how to be honest." That sentence followed me home like a shadow. Didn't know how to be honest. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. Honesty isn't just about not lying. It's about letting someone see the parts of you that scare even you. And I'd never done that, not with her, not with anyone. I used to think strength meant composure, control, keeping the world steady no matter what. But strength, I learned, is the opposite. It's standing in the wreckage and saying, "Yes, I did this, and I'll do better." A few weeks later, I started therapy. I walked into that office with the same guilt I used to carry home every night. The therapist asked, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Because I don't want to waste another person's faith." We talked about my fear of failure, my need to fix everything, my obsession with appearing dependable. It all came down to the same truth. I didn't lie to protect others. I lied because I couldn't stand being seen as imperfect. I confused love with performance. That realization hit harder than losing Maya, because it meant the problem wasn't situational, it was me. And unless I faced it, I'd keep breaking every good thing that came my way. Little by little, I started rebuilding. Not the marriage, but myself. I learnt to sit with discomfort instead of explaining it away. To tell the truth before it turned poisonous. To say, I don't know, without shame. One evening, months later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name in her handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I heard you started therapy. I'm glad. I'm not angry anymore. I just hope you're being kind to yourself. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not wishing against you. Maya. I read that letter a dozen times. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was grace. And sometimes, grace is the only closure you get. That night, I lit a candle in the kitchen, the way she used to. I placed her letter beside it and whispered, "Thank you." I didn't cry this time. The tears had already done their job. What I felt was quieter, like forgiveness, but for myself. I kept the ring she left behind, not as a symbol of failure, but as a reminder of what honesty costs and what it's worth. Every time I look at it, I think of all the moments I could have chosen truth and didn't. And then I remind myself that I can choose it now. Some people think redemption is about winning someone back. It's not. Redemption is learning to live in a way that would make them proud if they ever looked your way again. So I do small things differently. I answer texts right away. I tell the truth, even when it's awkward. I admit when I'm scared, when I'm tired, when I'm not okay. It sounds simple, but it's revolutionary once you've spent years lying for comfort. Sometimes, when I pass the old office building, I still see her in my mind, standing there in that sea green dress, holding the box of pastries, her eyes wide with disbelief. That memory used to destroy me. Now it keeps me honest, because I never want to see that look on someone's face again, not because of me. If she ever watches this, I hope she knows I finally understand what she tried to teach me. That love isn't about shielding someone from pain. It's about walking through it with them, unarmed. That trust isn't built by perfection, but by transparency. And maybe one day, if our paths cross again, I'll look her in the eyes, not to beg, not to apologize, but to say, "Thank you for teaching me how to tell the truth." I used to think losing Maya was my punishment. Now I know it was my lesson. You can't lie your way into keeping something real. You can only tell the truth and accept what it costs. Some nights I still catch myself setting out 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for the ghost of who I was. Then I stop, smile, and pour one back. I don't live for ghosts anymore. I live for the man I'm trying to become, the one who tells the truth, even when it trembles out of him. People ask if I'd do things differently if I had the chance. I would, not because I want the same ending, but because I'd want her to remember me as someone brave enough to be honest. That's all I ever owed her. That's all any of us owe the people we love. So if you're listening to this and you're holding something back, a secret, a lie, a half-truth you keep calling protection, tell it. Tell it now, while you still can, because silence doesn't save anyone. It just delays the heartbreak. I can't change what I did, but I can choose what kind of man I am from here. And maybe, if there's any mercy left in this world, that will be enough. Sometimes when I walk past the old places, the park bench, the bakery, the corner she used to wait at, I still feel her there. Not as pain, but as a reminder. A quiet voice that says, "Be honest this time." And I listen. Every single day I listen. Because the truth doesn't erase what you've done. It just lets you live with it and still walk forward. And that, I've learnt, is what redemption really means. If this story made you pause, don't just scroll away. Think about the person who still believes you without asking questions. Text them, call them, tell them something true tonight, because trust doesn't break in a moment. It fades, one silence at a time. And if you've been silent for too long, this is your sign to speak. Leave a comment if you've ever wished you'd told the truth sooner. And if you believe people can change, stay till the next story. You'll understand why.